right. Here we go. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for doing lunch therapy.
Thanks for having me, Adam. I'm very happy to be here.
So, okay, I don't know if I'm giving you divulging secrets, but in our exchange, it seemed like you were going to New Orleans.
I'm in New Orleans. Yeah, I am on a self-imposed writing sabbatical for the next couple of weeks. A friend of mine has an apartment that she is not using. She bought a house recently, so it's sitting here, and I thought, well, that's free and easy, and I can go not spend any money and try to figure out how to, continue my career after this very impossible year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how do you not spend money in New Orleans though? There's so much to eat there.
Well, I know I say that, and then last night we went out and ate at La Boca, which is like, I think it's like a chef's kind of restaurant.
Mm.
It's just this like great Argentinian steakhouse that's really, really, really good. And yes, I did not spend money.
Well, it's funny. I have a good friend who's going to be in New Orleans. He's going to be on the new Queer as Folk that they're doing, and they're shooting it in New Orleans. So he's going to be there for like 4 or 5 months. And I am already planning my trip there because it's like, there's so many restaurants I want to try.
Yeah, so there's a lot of restaurants. I mean, the great thing is about New Orleans is this is kind of my second home. So I can kind of be here and not feel like there's no sense of urgency when I'm here because I'm here. It feels nearly almost as much as I'm in Nashville these days.
So can I ask what you're working on?
Sure. I don't know what kind of muddy, murky answer you're going to get, but you can ask.
Sure.
I mean, I think where I'm at right now is I think I'm feeling a bit of an impatience to sort of move out of like the food space entirely,
Sure. I've been there before.
Yeah. And, I've worked in the restaurant industry for, since I was 15 years old and like very professionally for the last 20 years, and so it's been like, there's more here than that. And plus, but however, I understand how, the world works and kind of the niche that you fall into, whether you like it or not. And
I always think of that Gabrielle Hamilton quote from her book where she says, be careful what you get good at. You'll be doing it for the rest of your life. Exactly. And it's so true. And if I had known that, I never would have become a food blogger 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to sort of be in this, I'm trying to find the way to do it in a way that still feels gratifying for me. And I think my answer right now, I've only been here for two days, and I've already sort of put some pieces together that look like, I think the real burden for me and the real like emotional burden, not like no one's putting it upon me, but sort of the burden I'm putting upon myself is this urge to talk about restaurant culture and chef world, and there's a lot of anger there for me. And I think what I'm doing this sabbatical is wholly about remembering how to be in love with food and separate food from restaurant culture.
That's really interesting.
That's really, I think, my job right now as, someone that knows that, I still, and frankly, like, I don't want to waste the decades of experience I have with food, I mean, there is something to cultivate and mine for here that isn't just my deep frustrations and heartache over, what the restaurant industry does to people.
Yeah. So, well, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's funny. I relate to that because I've been in Hollywood for, like since 2011 and trying to sell screenplays and TV shows and all this stuff. And now I'm sort of doing what you're doing with food, where it's like, I'm trying to get back in touch with like, why did I enjoy storytelling in the first place? And why, and so I'm kind of trying to go back to my roots. So I totally get that. But I wanted to congratulate you though. I mean, you've had so much success already in this transition from chef to writer. I mean, you won the James Beard Award. You have a beautiful book that everybody was raving about. And so I'm curious what that's been like for you, just in terms of your sense of self and identity to now be known as a writer as much as you're known as a chef.
That was the goal. That was a always the goal. I feel like I was able to do it sooner than I thought I would be able to do it, which has its ups and downs, you know, because there was sort of this, you know, heat of the Me Too movement where in the same way that I think people get categorized for their jobs, not their work, which I consider different things. You know, my job was a pastry chef. My work is something that I feel is a little bit more broad. You know, getting your opportunities in a moment where you have chosen to finally say some things about your experiences in this culture as a woman or in any marginalized sense, you know, in the LGBTQ community, in the BIPOC, you know, community, I think anytime you develop your voice in that way as people's first experience of you, yet another niche you fall into. And so it's been great. And I, of course, like don't regret. And I feel very lucky to have been, you know, adopted by an incredible publishing house. Being with Penguin Press is a ridiculous dream. And I, you know, have a great editor that I hope to continue to work with for a long time. And who understands, I think, sort of where I'm trying to go in a creative way, instead of, you know, always being in the chef category or always being in this, you know, speaking to the women's movement category. Part of what I want my work to be is telling stories of women. So that's something, even if I ever get to publish you know, fiction and things that aren't personal memoir, it will still be aligned with that. You know, there's a lot more freedom that you get though when you write about things in a fictionalized way. Kind of way that I'm hungry for. It takes its toll writing about your person all of the time, which is another sort of thing that I'm trying to sort of rework a little bit right now.
Well, you seem like a perfect candidate for lunch therapy, which is what you're on right now.
I was like, this is going to be real therapy. You get it.
Well, the nice thing is this is free and I don't charge anything. I just, you know, invade your personal space and ask you lots of personal questions. We'll start with, what did you have for lunch today?
You know, it's funny. I kind of started today, like every other day, and wasn't really thinking about, which I guess is good. I didn't think about you asking that question until I was sitting there eating my very sad food, and then I was like,
gosh.
I think Adam's probably going to ask me what I've eaten. But I've kind of, as I'm getting older, I actually don't eat a whole lot in the first part of the day. The first part of the day is like more about hydrating for me. Like I drink a lot of juice and water and coffee, which is the anti-hydration thing, but like a lot of coffee. And I just drink a lot from like, you know, 7 to around noon. And then I have a lot
of fruit. Do you pee a lot when you do that? Because like I pee all morning drinking a lot of water and coffee.
The weird thing is like I'm having to intentionally drink a lot of water. I'm just not someone, there's a scene in, did you watch Mad Men with Lisa? Okay, well, sure. I've watched them sort of on a loop since they came out. And there's this one scene, I think it's like in season 4, where he's at a diner with Peggy and they're drinking coffee and the server keeps trying to give him water and he finally takes a sip of the water and he actually is like really visceral reaction on screen to how much he hates water. And
that's really funny.
My husband's always laughing at me. He's like, you have a tribe, you know, I just water. So like I have to like spend the first part of my day being really intentional about drinking water and getting hydrated so that I can go about the rest of my day and not think about it, because I really don't want to think about it.
Do you still not like water?
I hate water. I have to choke it down.
That's so funny. I love water. I really like it. It's so hydrating. I guess that's like what it's supposed to do.
Oh, you're so glowy. You're
I think it is true, but I pee all the time, so I think I drink too much of it. Well, it's also funny because like the way you were just talking about coffee is like I have French friends who put out wine at dinner and don't put out water. It's like you just drink wine, you know?
Well, there's some theories that suggest that water, like, you know, doesn't help your digestion. That you should eating. and I'm eating all of the time. So there's like,
But you kind of avoided the question here, which was, what did you have for lunch?
when I eventually start eating, it's usually cold fruit, especially when I'm in the South. Like it's hot, and it's really hot in New Orleans right now. So I always have fruit in the fridge that's really cold, like cantaloupe that's already cut, or watermelon that's already cut, or mango that's already cut. And I'll eat that with some coffee.
Was that what you did today?
That's what I did today. And then when I start to get hungry, I had a really sad piece of gluten-free toast with some freshly ground peanut butter and honey on it. And that was it. That's all I've eaten today.
Okay, so as your lunch therapist, I'm picking up on the word sad, which you used a couple of times now to refer to your gluten-free toast. So tell me why you think it's sad.
Well, it's sad because I hate that I have to eat gluten-free toast now. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto about 8 years ago, and then I wrecked the train and got diagnosed with something I'm still suffering to say out loud, which is full-blown celiac. But
Oh gosh.
well, I did it to my damn self, really. They gave me a warning like 8 years ago. They're like, you have this and you're going to really and I was like, no, it's fine. And I continued to be this, hard charging chef that, I was a pastry chef too. So like part of it was just my job. But, I was drinking a lot and eating a lot and traveling a lot and eating whatever anyone put in front of me and sick the whole time. I was not feeling great. If you look at pictures of me from like a couple of years ago, I'm so like bloated from the inflammation and the swelling. And I weigh the exact same as I did then, but the before and after of like me changing this one thing about my diet is remarkable.
But that's kind of poetic or tragic in a way to be a pastry chef who then can't eat gluten, right?
It's tragic. It's really hard. And it's really hard too, because we haven't had to go out. We haven't been able to go out a whole lot, but it's difficult to go to a restaurant and say to a server, I have an allergy. I don't know why. It's just a thing. Like, I don't want to have that kind of limitation, but I do. And I can't, it's at the point now where I can't go back. So it's sad because I have to eat this gluten-free toast. And what I'd really love to do is go to, Bellegarde Bakery and get a beautiful baguette and eat it, as I'm walking home from the bakery and have this like perfectly idyllic morning with a baguette and some fresh butter, but that's not my life.
So is it over? I mean, like, can you literally not do that, or will you sometimes do that and just suffer the consequences?
Sometimes I get glutened and I know the protocol now. Like I'll know, and I at least now know what it does, and I know like, oh, this will be about 72 hours of this struggle, and I've found some tricks. Like if I take a Benadryl, because it started to become a little anaphylactic-y. I get throat sweats, and this is so boring. I'm so
No, it's not. I actually find it very interesting. It reminds me a little bit of Grant Achatz having tongue cancer, where it was sort of like a chef who, needs his taste. And it's like for you being a pastry chef, it's like to me, it's very poignant that now you're eating sad gluten-free bread for breakfast.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And it has also changed a lot about my drive has always been in pastry and in bread, and I cook a lot. Like I love cooking, but the real craft of cooking for me rests in pastry and in baking. And I just can't bring myself to get excited about cooking gluten-free or baking gluten-free.
Yeah.
And
what about like naturally gluten-free desserts, though, like puddings or yeah.
But those aren't the thing. Like I really just am still mourning the loss. So,
yes.
But I'm getting over it. I'm starting to get really excited. That Alice Medrick came out with that beautiful book that was I don't even know that she used the term gluten-free. It was just called Flavor Flowers. And talked about all these beautiful other flowers and sort of made it about something that wasn't a restriction, but and giving you access to like a whole other pantry. And so when I start thinking about it that way, I can get really excited. But it's just like a total one, it just changes everything about, I'm a Southern baker, you know, and I built in French technique. And so everything is about this good quality wheat flour. And now I can't even barely touch the stuff. So,
but it seems like it overlaps neatly with your career shift too, that as you were already thinking about moving away from restaurants to writing, it's actually like, well, now what you did in those restaurants, you couldn't necessarily do anymore. So it's kind of makes it easier.
For
Yeah.
sure. Like it definitely is like, well, there's no going back to that.
Right. Or if you did go back to it, I guess like creatively, I mean, there must be some kind of creative opportunity there to sort of maybe take what you know and then apply it to,
Yeah.
gluten-free baking. I don't know if that's exciting to you, but I'm sure there's plenty of chefs out there who are doing that.
It is and it isn't. I can get, I still have daydreams. I don't think I have daydreams that last very long about having a bakery anymore. Because that takes a really particular kind of energy,
Mm-hmm.
and really deep, like never ending, not sleeping passion for I just don't have that anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of bread bakers who do, and I love watching them, but I'm so tired and middle-aged now that I can't
I
imagine.
think we're the same age, so don't say we're middle aged because I was researching you and we're exactly the same age. So I'm not there yet.
But I just like when I think about the ways I want to cook, it's simpler now.
Yeah.
It's simpler now.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about, because this is something I'm curious about, is it feels like being a chef or a pastry chef in particular is about pleasing people in a way. It's like you're catering to your customers. You want to make people happy supposedly, but then I feel like the writing that you've been doing is sort of provocative, and it's sort of I mean, especially talking about the industry and and also basically being willing to put yourself out there and be call people out and stuff. So I wonder like if those two instincts are at war within you, or how do you make peace with those two sides of yourself?
Um, I don't know that I have.
Right.
I think there is a part of me that does really work in food because I have a deep sense of wanting to provide for people more
Mm-hmm.
than please people. I think it's more
Interesting.
caretaking kind of urge than it is a pleasing kind of urge.
Mm.
And there is, of course, I love hospitality and I love true hospitality and I love the sense of like looking at a room and seeing what anyone might need in any given moment and knowing the answer and knowing
Mm.
how to give that is a real powerful feeling for me. Like it's a thing that I really love, that is a gift of mine, like, and a gift of certain people, like, and I can recognize other people who sort of are hardwired for that hospitality sort of urge.
Mm-hmm.
And I love when I find them and they're actually working in hospitality. We get disheartened, I think, and we don't stay very long sometimes, or we stay too long sometimes.
What's the
But
difference? I just have to ask though, because that's really interesting to me. But like, how would you distinguish the difference between taking care of people versus pleasing people? Because I guess you distinguish that, but I'm curious how you distinguish that.
I think I distinguish that by saying pleasing people feels very generic and surface.
Mm-hmm.
Taking care of people and caretaking is something a little deeper, where you're not inserting yourself in the need, you're just providing the tools to fulfill the need, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're trying to please someone, it's also sort of a selfish need as well for something. And when you're truly aiming for true hospitality in a caretaking kind of way, you're not the one that needs anything from it.
Hmm.
And so I think, when I think of really true hospitalitarians like Pardistit, and, I mean, there are a thousand I could name, but Pardistit is sort of my like ultimate ideal of how to set a tone that is watchful and careful and considerate and generous.
Is she in Birmingham?
Birmingham. She's Frank. She
Yeah.
and Frank have Fan and Chez Fan and Highlands and Bottega,
Okay.
and she is just someone that whenever I think about true caretaking and hospitality, her name comes to mind, because she can look easily and she won't insert herself, but
Hmm.
before you know it, you have something that you were about to realize you needed in a moment, and all of your things are, and all of your needs are anticipated. And it's not to say like, the beauty of someone like Pardistit is it's not like a spoil. It's just the way she interacts with people all the time, which is to watch and to care and to, and to sit at a table if you're having lunch with someone and to recognize that like their water is halfway full, your water is a quarter of the way full. Well, you fill up their water first and then you fill up yours.
Right.
And there's just a flow that you can get into that feels really nice to offer of yourself for people.
Well, what I'm getting from what you're saying, which is interesting because it's making me think about Bill Addison. I was reading his article about you and the way he described your desserts, because it sort of feels like what you're saying is it's not about ego or narcissism. It's about just sort of putting something in front of somebody that's honest and real. And I forget how he described your desserts, but that he like how much he loved them. But it seemed like he was talking about it, sort of how they weren't flashy or show offy. They were kind of rustic, I guess.
I just wanted things to be delicious and comfortable and not intimidating. And I really, those were sort of my, even when I was in the big leagues and, people were tweezering, bee pollen on like one little spot of a steak or something, like I wanted every single guest to feel a sense of like utter and complete comfort before they left the restaurant. I don't deal in pretensions and I really hate food that does. I've got to the point now where like, I don't care how delicious it is. If it looks like I have to think for 3 minutes about the right way to eat it, I lose interest, I lose interest really quickly and that kind of stuff. Now I have a lot of friends that cook that way and make beautiful dishes. I just prefer to make you feel really comfortable and give you something hopefully that is really also full of flavor. And I don't know, I never wanted anyone to feel intimidated by a dessert. I wanted them to feel like that same satisfaction that you get when you're sitting on the couch and you're just in your cozies and you're in your like you have a spoon and the pint of ice cream and it's because you're satisfying something else besides just wanting to have something sweet. There's something else there that dessert can do if you let it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just went last night to the Girl and the Goat, which is Stephanie Izzard's restaurant, and the desserts were my favorite part of the meal because they were just so. I mean, everything was delicious, but it was just like, she had this popcorn like sundae kind of thing. It was all just very simple but beautiful, and so I get what you're saying. So you have a book called Our Lady of Perpetual Hunger, and so for people who are listening who haven't read it, I'm curious if you could just talk us through a little bit about like your childhood, where you grew up, and just some of that stuff, just so we can check those boxes.
I'm an Army brat, so
Okay.
I grew up all over. I was born in Panama near the Canal Zone, and then from there we went to Germany, and I spent most of my childhood overseas, and then we moved to, it was actually very funny, and I write about this in the book, but like when I get really confused about sort of like my seemingly like dichotomous personalities, like there's a part of me that's really loves classic, there's a little bit of a classicist in me, and then there's a little like shit kicking anarchist as well.
Oh wow, okay.
And they're always diametrically opposed, and I'm always sort of like grappling with these two parts of myself, and that wants to sort of have this like pastry chef, like they're very two clear parts of who I am. And actually, two children are almost damn near perfect personifications of each side of that. But
really, that's fascinating too.
my son is like incredibly collected. He's a little persnickety. He's hilarious, but he's got really tight sort of humor and really quick-witted and sharp and clean and precise, and can render like as an incredible artist and can render anything almost from life. I mean, he's really got a great brain in that way. My daughter is just like an explosion of like wildness and and they're both really beautiful and really incredible. And I'm like, my mom actually called it, she was like, she's like, I never realized like how much, like how those two people are actually like the halves of your
I
personality.
love that. I'm jealous. I wish I had two kids that were two halves of my personality. I don't know what they would be, but I'm curious if are there two dishes that you make that embody those two sides of you? Like, is there one that you make when you're feeling more, controlled, and one that you make when you're feeling a little wilder?
Um, no, I think my pastry, I think like my baking kind of falls into this one category of like being, I think the way where you can recognize it in my baking is not necessarily in one dish, but in the way that each dish is presented. So like for example, there, primarily like my catalog of recipes are very rooted in this comfort food idea, right? Southern, layer cakes and chess pies and cookies and things that seem really familiar. But where it becomes really sort of the part of my brain that needs sort of this technical astuteness and
Mm-hmm.
tightness and obsession and strange sort of, fixation part of my personality is the technique. So there's a lot of French technique. There's a lot of really deeply practicing, layers of technique to get those custards just right, to get those layers just right of the pastry, to get, and so what I think what I ended up kind of naturally doing was taking things that made me feel really comforted and warm and loved as a recipe and as a food item, and then really reworking it from the back end with this really sort of semi-obsessive, technical, fixation.
Well, it's funny because I was watching Baking with Julia yesterday. It was on this. I have this app on my Apple TV called Pluto, which shows old episodes of like cooking shows and stuff. So, and I was watching her cook with the guy that wrote the book Death by Chocolate. And this was like in the 90s, early, I guess it was in the 80s. And he was shocking her because he made a raspberry puree, and he's like, I'm going to do something very modern, and he flung it onto the plate. And she was like, oh my goodness. She says, it looks like blood. But I guess when we were talking about being like wild in the kitchen, like I guess I was thinking of like, swooping like sauces and stuff. But it feels like your food isn't like that at all.
No. I mean, I no, and I don't think that's my personality so much as just and I never worked in restaurants, I think, that would have allowed that, honestly.
Right.
I never worked in places that were swoopy, splashy kind of
Right.
places. So
So so I know that we talked a little bit about your childhood, but I guess I'm curious, like, can you walk us through the journey from cooking at home as a kid to being working at some of the top restaurants in the country? Like, how did that happen?
the reason I bring up this whole weird dichotomous personality is because I was sort of raised in this very German, cold, classic, antiquated, and I was eating pastries in Vienna that are like, a little stodgy, but really full of flavor and like, they mean something, these desserts.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would flop back over to South Georgia or North Georgia, whichever one that my dad needed to go to training. And so I would have these experiences of like classic European, finesse. And then I would go to the South, and it literally was just like shit kicking redneck boys, like with like warm oysters in a cooler and like, and it was just a whole different, like I was flip flopping between these two worlds. And when I think about my childhood, I can see the why of
Mm-hmm.
of me in a lot of ways. Like,
Well, it makes me think about the way that like biography gets imprinted on our food in a weird way, like that your personal experiences get channeled through the food that you make, which is so cool.
yeah, totally. And I can remember those days walking through like the square in any Austrian city, Salzburg, or and like being obsessed at 10 years old with the
Mm-hmm.
chocolate cases and the pastry cases. And I still don't really actually have much of a sweet tooth. Dessert's not my go-to, honestly.
Really?
No,
Oh,
not
you're
at all.
full of so many contradictions. I think I need like 3 hours with you to get through all this.
I'm much for myself sometimes, but like I always go to salty. Salty's my
Huh.
I'll always go to salty. anytime. But I think I was obsessed with like the presence of them. Like they're incredible to see these like cakes in a window that are
Mm-hmm.
I mean they don't look like they could be real. They don't look like you could eat them, you know. They're so beautifully done. And as an American kid, like I'd never seen anything like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't, you know, literally grew up eating Little Debbie cakes,
Right.
and
Me too. Yeah.
like Hershey bars was my chocolate, and that's fine. But then you go over there and you're like, oh, like
Mm-hmm.
there's something different, and there's something real, and there's something like someone just spent a whole morning building this gorgeous thing that someone's just going to have with their coffee, and it's incredible. Like
And there's something so more sustainable about that way of it, of indulging, where it's like a beautiful piece of cake that you have in the afternoon versus like pigging out on a bag of like Hershey samplers like I did at my grandmother's house growing up. So yeah, I'm very jealous. So okay, so you went to Vienna, you took in all this stuff, but were you cooking like as a kid? Like were you cooking for your family? Were you cooking, like when did it all kick in?
I can remember thinking I was a magical genius because my mom and dad got a toaster oven when I was like in the fourth grade. And I literally invited kids over for this. I was like, you guys, because I started putting Chips Ahoy cookies in the toaster oven and warming them up just a little bit, right?
Mm,
Just enough where like the edges got just a little burned.
wow, got
Like
it.
that was like step one. And then step two was like putting a marshmallow on top and like
Wow.
grilling it. And so like it became this thing, like I would invite kids over and we would like come up with Chips Ahoy toaster oven concoction.
That's so funny. My mom once bought me this thing at the grocery store. It was called Dolce Frutta, and it was basically like magic shell. And I remember like dipping grapes in it and like making chocolate covered grapes and thinking I was a genius. Like, oh my God, this is incredible. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, keep going. I keep interrupting you. So keep telling your story.
That was like that. No, otherwise I ate a lot of Burger King on post. There was always a Burger King. And so
Mhm.
like I was always eating Burger King. And my mom would cook us dinner at night. And it was traditional, lower to middle class family dinners,
Mhm.
a lot of TV dinners and a lot of casseroles, which I love,
Mhm.
chicken casserole that like no one would not like that chicken casserole.
Right.
It's just there's no way to not like it. But yeah, and then I really started getting into baking later. I knew I loved eating and I didn't know what to do with that because that's not a thing a girl's supposed to love,
Mhm.
especially growing up then, like
Sure.
you weren't supposed to, and I was a dancer and I really wasn't supposed to love eating. And I loved eating. I've always loved eating.
It's like being a gay man now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of my gay guy friends, guys, I think in particular,
Yeah.
like are having a hard time sort of with that relationship. And
Sure. Yeah.
that's really familiar to like being a teen in the early 90s.
Mhm.
Like, it just wasn't a thing you were allowed to do. And all of my friends were like so tragically skinny, and it was the Kate Moss era.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I remember I also got tragically thin in order to try to keep dancing. And my dad did this really great thing that I will always really be grateful to him for. I'm not a tall girl, but I'm a sturdy girl,
Mhm.
and like I am a weight now that I'm like, oh, I carry my weight fine. Like it's great. I'm 5'6" and I can be this weight and I'm totally happy. But back then I was still this weight and I was trying to be a more petite woman so that I could
Mhm.
be dancing. And I eventually got down to like 102 pounds, which for my
Wow.
time is unthinkable.
No.
And, was very thin and was very wispy, and and I could do all the beautiful things, and I didn't have anything moving around when I
And this
was
was
getting.
ballet you're talking about? And
Yeah,
was that encouraged like by your teachers to lose weight? I mean, were they pushing you to
yeah.
do that? Wow.
Well, culturally, yes. Like you just knew, like if you were not the right size, you weren't going to get roles, you weren't going to get
Mhm.
in the front, you definitely weren't going to get the pas de deux, you weren't going to get to have,
Right.
you weren't going to get to do much, you were going to be
Mhm.
background filler. And the bigger you were, the further back you got. And the reality was I should have been a modern dancer. And I had teachers that tried to push me into that space. And I was like, no, I'm a ballerina.
It feels like there's a place for that now in like 2021. There should be like a body positive ballet, like a ballet that's like for
I
all
mean,
shapes and sizes.
yeah, I mean, we can move, it's not,
Yeah.
it's not the problem. But my dad did this great thing where when I got really thin, he took me to a dietitian.
Mm.
And that's when I started really thinking about food and thinking about like the power of food. And she was really incredible. I had to see her once a week. And the goal was to like for me to gain like 15 pounds, which was kind of dumb. Like but whatever. Like I'm glad we're in a space where we don't clock women's numbers the way we used to, or
Sure.
people's numbers the way we used to. But like back then, there was like a weight that you had to be that was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And we know more now, which is very good. And but she was so useful in helping me get excited about food to like empower myself. And I started getting really excited about learning about, which proteins and which carbohydrates like make you like stronger and healthier.
Mm.
You're easy to digest. If you eat this with this, it works. If you eat this with this, it really doesn't work. And so I started thinking from a really young age about food in that way. Like,
You seem like you were always a good student, like whether you're doing ballet and you wanted to be good at ballet, and then now you're shifting and like wanting to be good at nutrition. Like,
yeah, I think I'm a good learner, but I'm not a great student in the
oh,
same way.
okay.
I try to take care of myself, but I'm a shitty patient.
Okay, got it. There's all these funny distinctions between like pleasing people versus taking care of them, and being a good student versus being a good learner. But I like these distinctions, because they make it more specific.
I might be a bad student, actually.
Right, but I think but it actually ties into like the people pleasing, because it's like being a good student is about pleasing your teacher, being a good learner is about pleasing yourself. So I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a big beginning for me, and then it kind of rolled from there. I started really enjoying doing dumb stuff like baking from boxes, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to sort of like, I would bake from a box, but then I'd be like, I don't like the frosting. I'm going to make my own frosting. I'll make my own frosting. And I started like taking it apart to where like I just wasn't satisfied with any store-bought thing. I wanted to make it all. And also I started to get nostalgic for growing up in Europe and having just the ease of walking down the street and getting like a beautiful broochen any time of the day,
What's a broochen?
Broochen is just like a little roll, it's just like a demi baguette, but even smaller. And it's like always like, it's always like, when you make the really thin brittle, like a glassy sugar brittle, and it just cracks. It's like, it's always that kind of crack when you spread open, and it has a smell that it only smells like that in Germany. Like it's just, it is a beautiful little roll. And traditionally you would like shove it full of like deli meats or cheeses, some mustard, and eat it like that. And that's like what I grew up eating in Germany, were these like little broochen with like yellow mustard, or I was very American, but yellow mustard, always had better mustard, but I will choose yellow mustard over every mustard.
Right.
A nice piece of cheese, some deli meat, and then you just eat it. And like,
was it sugar on the outside that made it crack like that?
No,
it was just the bread, like the actual. Wow. So I mean, it makes me think a little bit about Julia Child, like coming from Pasadena and going to France and having Soul Meunier for the first time, and that like opening her mind. But you had your mind opened at a young age, but then you were taken away from it, and so you were trying to recreate it for yourself.
Yeah, actually entirely my baking started because I wanted to make that bread. And I wanted to have those pastries again. And like cookies, there are German cookies that only come out during Christmas time. Again, like pretty stodgy and very gingery, and the texture is always a little tough, they're very German.
And did you show a talent right away? Like, did you start making this stuff and like your family was like, whoa, Lisa, like you've got a gift? Or was it more like it was a gradual kind of thing?
Oh, what a nice thought. I don't think my family was ever like, oh, Lisa, wow, about anything.
Yeah, mine either. But my name's not Lisa, so that doesn't really make sense.
I don't know, man. Like, we're the same age. I just don't know that we grew up in an era where anyone gave a shit what we were doing. Right?
Well, I'm Jewish, so my parents were smothering me all the time with attention, but they were very like they wanted me to go a certain way. So it's a little different.
Anybody really was keeping an eye on me, or
Right.
like they were there, and my mom would be so mad if she heard me say that, but they were all distracted with their own lives. My parents were young parents, and they were great for us, and they were great parents, and they took very good care of us. But I mean, they got literally. I was talking to my parents just last week. They came up for a visit, and we were talking about how they got started, and they met in August at 17 years old, and were married by October. My dad dropped out of high school. They've been married ever since 17. Can you imagine? And then they had us just a couple of years later. So they were like, who knows what was
My
going
mom
on.
was 18 when she married my dad too. So yeah, it's very similar stories. And we both wear glasses too. So we have a lot in common.
It might be the same person.
I think so. Okay, so wait, when did you start working in professional kitchens?
Well, I think I've always worked in kitchens. I took my first job at 15. I was
Wow.
a potato peeler for a family buffet called Park Place in Dahlonega, Georgia. And then worked at a Hungry Howie's pizza place. And there was something, and this is really dumb, but it was one of those moments where I actually got scared at how good I was. I could run both deck ovens on a busy Saturday night, and I could move so fast. And all of a sudden I just was there to like work the cashier. Like it was a summer job. I was just gonna, fucking add up people's stuff and get them out the door. And all of a sudden I had to jump on the deck one night, and that's where I stayed. And I was fast and good, and I could sling pizzas and get them out the door. And then I was like, oh shit. This is not what I want to be good at.
Right. Well, I'm curious in terms of the two sides of your personality that you talked about, like, is the ability to do that like more of the wild side, or is it more of the controlled side? Like where did that come from within you to be able to do that?
I'm very good at chaos.
Chaos.
I'm really good at like seeing something and knowing how to hopefully insert myself in a positive way. Like I'm not saying like I'm the boss, like I'm not trying to be the leader, but I know where I can go to fucking help. Where I'm like, oh, I can lock this down, and I'll like find the space where I can solve that one problem. I'm a really big problem solver. Like everything I want to do is about solving problems. I'm just driven to solve problems. It's a very blue collar thing.
No, I get that. Well, also like there's something about that energy of like being in a physical space where there's real physical things to do, which runs completely counter to like what you're doing now, which sitting in front of a blank screen and just having to type words. It's like sometimes like when I'm doing that, I'm like, I wish I was in the kitchen, like running around, like turning burners on and off. So like, do you sometimes feel that way when you're writing?
I feel that way all the time when I'm writing. Because I think the constant like hurricane in my brain, and I don't even mean that in a noble way. Like I wish I could organize myself better. I wish I could, the only space I feel truly organized right now, and I'm hoping to get there with writing. I'm getting closer with writing, but the only space that I am truly organized physically and mentally and emotionally is in the kitchen. Like, all my boxes are locked.
Will you tell me about that? I'm so curious because like having had the experience that you've had and being such a celebrated chef, like, so when you go in, like, what was the last meal that you cooked that was like a real meal, and what was that like, and how do you go about it?
I mean, now I basically just cook for my family now, which
is
really nice. And my parents were in town, and my dad said that he wanted some steak, and so I went to the butcher and got a really nice tri-tip, and he had brought some. He calls himself a gardener, but he has a full-blown farm in Northwest Florida. He brought up about 4 pounds of red potatoes, and I had just gotten some crimson okra from my friend who grows it down the street from my house. And what else did we have? I made some cornbread.
Wow.
And it was a really simple meal, and I just, my mom gets overwhelmed by cooking really easily, and she even gets overwhelmed by me cooking. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, this is, I'm happy to do this. Not only does it make me happy, but it's actually really easy for me, Mom. Like, it doesn't stress me out the way it stresses you out. But so, like, my kitchen is very small. It's like a very small galley kitchen. I've been in kitchens on boats, truly, that are bigger than so there's no space. But what I have is a very organized system. I have all my tools exactly where I need them to be. I've got 4 different kinds of cutting boards that all live in one space. I've got one booze block that I always work on, and then the other cutting boards go on top of the booze block. Like,
Mm-hmm.
all of my cast irons are in this one corner, all of my spices are in this one space. Like, I have to be really careful, and I've sort of reassigned. I've got actually like a metro rack in my kitchen that I pull out and pull in of my laundry room, and it's got all of my pantry because I don't actually have a lot of cabinet space. So all of my things are organized in nice little I call them restaurant containers, because they remind me of, like, when you go to like certain restaurants, they have these little plastic containers that have all of their
Mm-hmm.
high quality plastic containers with all the labels. So I've got all of my shit labeled and organized so that I can just grab it easily. But it just makes for it makes for a meal like that, which seemed to my family like, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, the longest thing, the thing that took the longest was just, I always let my meat, so I always season my meat really well and just let it sit at room temperature. I just like chop a lot of garlic, cut up some onions in big chunks so that I don't have to worry about scraping them off.
Mm-hmm.
Olive oil, salt, black pepper, and rub, really get that meat massaged and let that sit with
Mm-hmm.
a towel over it at room temp for several hours, and then I cook it, and so, like, I let it sit for about an hour so that it can come to room temp and sit in that marinade. And I'll go drink a glass of wine and visit. And then I'll go into the kitchen, get the vegetables prepped. And everything was just a high roast. I wasn't trying to do anything fancy. I seasoned everything really well.
Uh-huh.
And then I roasted the okra and the potatoes, whipped up the cornbread, which is a muscle memory at this point,
Mm-hmm.
And so everything's just a move, like,
Yeah.
I'm warming up the cast iron skillet while I'm seasoning the vegetables. And then I pull out the cast iron skillet and pour the batter in.
Mm-hmm. It's like a
And,
dance. It's like when you were a dancer, it makes me think that you're dancing through your kitchen, you know?
and always trying to, like, only got one oven at home, and it's a regular janky ass oven. It's nothing special. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
always thinking about the temperature. And especially in the summer, I want the oven on as little as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have a fan because it's a shitty kitchen. And so I'm always having to sort of think about, like, airflow and, like, how to keep
Mm-hmm.
everything from, like, steaming out the living room, which is, like, right there. And
Well, it makes me think a little bit about the way you describe Purdue St.
yeah,
The way that you said that she kind of walks into a restaurant or walks into her restaurant, sees the whole room and sees everything there. And it feels like you have that sort of like Terminator vision, like, in your kitchen, it's like, okay, this is roasting, this has got to go. The steak is marinating, that, it's like, you see it all happening at once.
I think for me, the people who I love and I'm drawn to the most, and it's because I love people who are in their head all of the time,
Yeah.
but my favorite people who cook food and are in food are in it with their whole bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Their whole bodies are engaged, and it's about touch and smell and hearing and feeling, and it's the whole experience. My guests, even, it's just my parents, like, I just want to make sure they're getting the right smell.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to smell, I make sure that there's no droppings on the bottom of my oven before I turn it up to 475.
Right.
And I, just little stuff that matters to me that, like,
Mm-hmm.
I think, maybe the rest of the 75% of the rest of the world doesn't think about, but, like, certain cooks do,
But it goes back to you wanting people to feel cared for and not necessarily trying to please them, but just sort of making them feel at home and comfortable. So it makes sense. I can't believe how much time has flown by the way. Like, we're almost done with our session, and I have so much more I want to ask you. So I wanted to ask you, I have 2 questions. One was about, like, being in a kitchen with other people versus being by yourself, like being in a restaurant kitchen where there's like lots of people running around versus being alone in your own kitchen. Like, where are you happiest?
Well, the great thing about being a pastry chef is that typically you're pretty alone in the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
So I only worked on the line a marginal amount of, my experiences. I mean, I would train my pastry cooks to work pastry during the night and be there. And I don't mind that energy. It's fun. And I love doing events with other people. And I love being in a space where like you're working, depending on who the people are. But typically I'm with like my crew. I'm with like Chidi Kumar and Rebecca Wilcombe. And, I'm with like my best friends. And so we're like always blaring music. And I mean, those are basically the only things I say yes to anymore.
Right. If it's going to be fun for you and not dealing with like toxic restaurant culture.
Yeah. And it's always women,
Yes.
There are men I love cooking with. Jason Stanhope in Charleston, South Carolina is someone I love cooking with. I cooked with him. The last event that I think all of us did was Charleston Food and Wine of 2020.
What's his restaurant?
Fig in Charleston.
Oh yeah, I went there by myself when I was passing through Charleston, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic.
It's high tomato season right now, and he does this beautiful, every year he does this beautiful tomato, like confit tart sort of thing, and it's just perfect. He is I think one of the best chefs in the world.
Really? Yeah. No, I really liked it there. I thought it was so cozy and elegant, but not pretentious. Okay, wait. The other question I wanted to ask you is, and this is like a longer question, but we still have a little time, which was about like developing your personal style through, going from like the buffet that you started peeling potatoes at to being at Husk or in these, high-end, higher, well-regarded restaurants and having a voice. Like, where did that voice start to emerge, and when did that start to happen?
I was kind of really trying to focus on technique, and before I started working professionally in pastry and restaurants, I was like, way back in the day, it's so common now, but it was very weird back then, but I was so grateful. And it was something that I think was unusual because I was unusual, but not unusual in a town like Nashville. One of the great things about Nashville is like this real urge that everyone has to support cottage industry and to, and I was a cocktail server at a shitty college bar, and it was terrible. And when I would go home, I would have, one of my kids I'd have to do like drop off, pick up. My husband would work during the day, I'd work at night. Well, still wasn't enough money, but I compensated for that. Even with all of the hours we were working, we still were struggling. And so I started running a bake shop out of my kitchen, and I would do cakes and breads and sell things to my neighbors, and they would make special requests. And it's funny because I sort of never really think about it, but I was doing a lot of gluten-free baking back then.
Really?
And I've been recalling it a lot lately because there were a lot of kids with allergies. This was when sort of the allergy culture, we started seeing it with the young kids a lot. And and there were a lot of vegans in my neighborhood and stuff like that. And so
this is in Nashville?
Okay. Yeah. And, I would make a lot of vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, cakes. And and my caveat was like, they're never going to be like fondant, like sculpted cakes. They're going to be traditional layer cakes. They're going to be delicious, and they will look as beautiful as I can get them, but primarily they're going to be delicious.
Yeah.
Like, that's my priority.
But how do you make your, because like it's funny, like I remember the City Bakery in New York used to have a chocolate chip cookie, and now they're closed, sadly. And I think the New York Times, David Leite at the New York Times, like uncovered their secrets and wrote about how they did it. And like they aged their cookie dough for 3 days. And I've done all that, and I've copied that recipe, and I've done it with, with different kinds of butter, European style butter. And I can never, ever get it to taste the way that it tasted at the City Bakery. And I'm curious for you, are there things that you do or like little touches that you do that you think make your food taste specifically like your food? Or how does that all work?
I hope so. I think, I mean, that's the hope, right? Like that your food tastes like your food. One of the biggest compliments I ever got was when Food and Wine put my hand pie on the cover, and this was just February of last year, which it seems like a decade ago now. But my daughter saw it and she was like, Mama, if I didn't know that was your hand pie, I would know that was your hand pie.
Love that. That's so cool.
It's just like, she's like, that's yours. Like, no one else's hand pie looks like that. And I was like, oh.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So I don't know if that just comes from, I don't know, consistency of like, I don't know, like of people talking about, I don't know I don't know the answer to that. I hope that it tastes like my food.
Well, I think based on the story you talked, I mean, based on this whole session, it seems like there's a combination of intense research and study and like wanting to get all the information and really go deep on like what you're looking at, but then also really trusting your instincts and like really being in touch of like with your pleasing yourself. And so I think that combination probably creates the food that you make.
Yeah, it does. And I do know by now how to throw things together and it will be like I never measure vanilla paste. I never measure salt. I never measure, there are things I just never measure. And I know how much I want at any given moment based on like, I just roasted some plums to put on top of, what did I make? I made Elizabeth David's almond cake. No, sorry, Lindsay Scher's almond cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made Lindsay Scher's almond cake and changed it up a little bit. It was gluten-free and then also just messed with the almond paste a little bit. But was making the plum jam, like compote, to go on top. And the plums were really tart. And so that informed everything, right? So like, I know what I want those plums to taste like. I know how to push them in that direction. And that's why recipes don't always work, because you have to have an informed decision there. Like you have to be part of those plums. Like you have to say like, well, this cake is actually like perfectly sweet. So I actually want it to stay a little tart, but I really want the vanilla to come out because of this. And so I put a little extra vanilla, a little bit less sugar, and so
I totally relate to that. I mean, like I make a lot of salads because I live in LA, and people are like, "What did you put in your salad?" Because I'll put it on Instagram, and I'll be like, olive oil, vinegar, salt, pepper. But it's like they want me to like give them more information. It's like, well, I just season it and like taste it, and if it's like salty, then or not salty enough, I'll add a little more. But yeah, I totally get that way of cooking.
I've been looking at your salads; they all look great.
And thank you so much.
Salad, salad is actually the best place people should start.
Yeah.
Because baking's too intimidating for everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, whoa, you're going to ruin it. And fine. Okay. It's not always true though, but salad is a really great place for people just to start getting comfortable, like tasting as you go.
And adding crunchy, adding different elements, different textures. Yeah. Well, Lisa, so we are not quite at the end because we start every podcast by asking, what did you have for lunch? But we end every podcast by asking, what will you be having for dinner tonight?
Oh, there is a little cafe here in New Orleans called Alma.
Okay.
A woman, I believe her name is Melissa. She's a Honduran chef. And she has this little Honduran cafe. So I'm going to go and see what she's got for dinner and probably have a little cocktail and then get back to work.
So are you there by yourself right now?
Yeah.
And how are you alone? Like when you're like in a city, like me personally, I love it. Like I like being by myself in a new city and going by myself to dinners, but I can imagine some people would be very uncomfortable. I'm curious how you feel.
I love being alone. I love traveling alone. I love solitude, especially when I'm trying to work. I've not yet figured out how to balance writer's work with my life yet. It's really hard for me. Like I need space. Like I'm covered up in books right now.
Yeah.
And basically it's like me, a French press, and I've got a giant sketchbook that I'm just like hang on the wall and write ideas, and I just sort of need that time to be alone. And then when I'm traveling, I especially like being alone. And this is like my second home, and I have a lot of friends here that I haven't even told I'm here yet.
Funny. Well, you're about to be exposed when this goes on the podcast. Yeah.
My best friend, one of my best friends, whose apartment is on loan to me right now. She and I had dinner last night, and we'll probably have dinner most nights. And my son lives here.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah, so I'm just gonna go get a small snack at Alma and a cocktail, and then my son's coming over, and he's gonna have my leftover steak from La Boca, and we're gonna visit, and then I'm gonna get back to work.
Do you mind if I ask, how old is your son?
He's 21.
Oh my gosh. Wow. You seem way too young. Like we're the same age. Okay. I get, wow. I guess I could have a 21-year-old son if I wanted to. I guess it's a little too late for that. Wait, I had another question. Oh, I was going to say, it's funny talking about traveling alone. I'm working on a project right now that might take me on a road trip through the South, like from California, from LA, and I'm going to stop in Tucson, I think, and stop in like Austin. And then I want to go to Nashville.
Okay.
So as a final question, where should I eat in Nashville?
Oh, well, the first place you have to go is Arnold's for lunch. You can't miss that.
What is it?
Arnold's is a meat and three, which I say, and I always think everyone's going to know what a meat and three is, but most people don't know what a meat and three is.
Well, I went to college in Atlanta, so I have a sense.
You know what a meat and three is. So for those of you who don't know what a meat and three is, a meat and three is a traditional, specifically to Tennessee, is kind of where they originated. Where you go through a cafeteria line and they have meats and vegetables, and you choose your meat and your three vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Or two vegetables or solely vegetables or whatever you want, but traditionally you would get a meat and three sides. And Arnold's has been there since 1983. It's Arnold's family, and I think he's the best chef cook in the city. He's remarkable. Khalil Arnold has taken it over from his dad. His mother Rose, his sister Rose, his brother Mon, and his other brother Franz. They all run it, and they're an incredible family. And it is like matriarch run, and she's just this powerful, incredible woman, and the food's remarkable. But
what would I get? What should I order there?
Oh gosh, my favorite food. I have to be different now than I used to be. I mean, everything is great. It really is pick your pleasure. I mean, his fried chicken is remarkable. It's my favorite fried chicken on the face of the planet.
Wow. Okay, I'm getting hungry already.
His green beans will knock your socks off. And if I'm in town, I'm taking you. So
yes, please. Yeah.
Inserting myself into your.
I would love nothing more. That would be fantastic.
The green beans are great. His creamed corn is great. The banana pudding is delicious. The desserts are the kind of sweet that make your face kind of scrunch up a little bit, but they somehow pull it off, and I don't know how. Like for someone who doesn't really like eating a whole lot of sugar and doesn't have a sweet tooth, I can somehow work my way through an entire, well, not anymore, but I used to be able to work my way through an entire banana pudding and not think twice about it. It's ridiculous.
Now, do I need to get Nashville hot chicken when I'm there?
You can. I mean, yeah, sure.
We have it here in LA now because we have Flamin' whatever.
You go to Bolton's. Bolton's is really the only one that's doing it in the same style that we all kind of came up with it. I mean, I've only been in Nashville for 20 years, but the original hot chicken experience was this very particular sort of you would go and you would go and wait in this long ass line and go into this little dive, restaurant kind of thing and get this really incredible chicken that was being fried in the moment and given to you. And but the thing about Bolton's, here's the trick though, you go to Bolton's, the hot chicken is good, but the hot fish sandwich is the move.
Ooh,
so,
yeah.
But if you make it to Bolton's, you really actually should get the hot fish sandwich.
I will. I mean, okay. And so very quickly, we got Arnold's, we've got Bolton's. Anything else I got to go to when I get good? I mean, I'm going to ask you off the record, but I feel like people who are listening may be traveling to Nashville.
There's a restaurant called Peninsula that's a delicious Spanish tapas style. And the owners are great. And it's this small little kitchen, and the food that comes out of that kitchen, it is a little bit more precious than the kind of food I've been looking for in the last couple of years, but fuck, it's delicious. And he's got a gin and tonic menu, and it's just it's a husband and a wife and three guys in the kitchen. That's it. And like that's their staff. They're open like 3 or 4 days a week, and they crank out some of the most beautiful food that I've eaten in Nashville in a long time. Really
Well,
delicious.
this is like a perfect place to stop because now I'm going to go Google that place and get ready to go there. Lisa, this was such a delight. I feel like we're best friends already. And I know a therapist and a patient shouldn't be friends, but I think it just happened. So,
So, and I think like we can maybe just dissolve our therapist patient relationship and go straight into.
yeah, let's do it. Well, if you're ever in LA, look me up and I'll definitely look you up when I'm in
Yeah,
Nashville.
let me know when you get to town.
Okay, well, good luck on the writing and enjoy New Orleans.
Thank you. I hope I see you soon.
All right, take care. Bye.